Well, hello, everybody. Hello. Is this on? Yep. There's a button. Testing. Oh. There's an on-off button, folks.
First day in the business, is it?
Yeah. This is the end of my business, let me tell you. Well, gang, thank you all very much for coming. What a nice crowd we have. I'm delighted to moderate this very special gentleman who is loved as an actor and loved as a person.
This is the most embarrassing part of it. Just get to the questions.
If you're unhappy, the interview is over. That's it.
Come on, everybody.
Would you help me welcome this delightful gentleman, Patrick Duffy? I think I kind of like you right off the bat, Patrick. With a name like Patrick, when do you think, what day of the year do you think he would be born? What do you think? Hanukkah? Easter? How many for St. Patrick's Day? You got it.
Read the bio.
Yes, I did. I mean, what a career you have had. If I listed all the many, many things that you did.
I've only had 3 jobs.
Yeah, but each one lasted a long
time.
Long time.
You can write my bio on your sleeve.
I mean, you have a degree in drama, but I want to take it back to when you were a little kid. I mean, were you into acting or theater? How did it all start for you?
Probably the way most people that started my business, which is in school, and you do things because it's fun. And when I was about to graduate from high school, I was going to enter into the University of Washington School of Architecture. I was going to be an architect. I just felt that was what I wanted to do. And my high school drama teacher said, I think you could maybe, she wasn't totally confident. She said, I think maybe you could make a living as an actor if you wanted to. And there's a special program at the UW that they're going to audition people for, and I'd write a letter of recommendation if you think you might want to do it. And I went, okay. So I went home and met my parents, you know, not knowing what to happen. I walked in, I said, so I'm not going to be an architect, I'm going to be an actor. And they went, yeah, okay, fine. And that was it. They had no investment in my future whatsoever. And so I entered the University of Washington in the School of Drama in a special program, and that changed the course of my life.
Well, what was the first job you had after you graduated college?
Oh, well, the problem I had is in my final quarter of school at the University of Washington, I ruptured both my vocal cords, and they literally exploded. And the doctor said, well, you will never act again, you'll probably never speak normally again. So I spent the last 2.5 months of college in a puppet making class. Because they said, you have 2 options. We can operate and we won't know what the quality of your voice will be, or you can go on 4 months restricted voice, which meant I could not say a word or use my vocal cords for 4 months to see how they would heal. So I spent the last quarter at the UW like a mime. And I said 2 things in 4 months. I said 2 words, and both of them were swear words.
Would you care to elaborate, Patrick?
Yeah, shit and damn it.
I apologize for asking.
Well, because those are the things you say before you think. You know, and other than that, I was very aware that I wasn't supposed to say things. Then once I was allowed to talk, I wasn't allowed to talk in an automobile. I wasn't allowed to talk in a room with more than 4 people. I wasn't allowed to talk with the radio or the television on, etc., etc. And because you cope with that by putting stress on your vocal cords. But I got a job. The entertainment editor for the Seattle Times was a friend of mine because he did interviewed and reviewed me during my school years. And we made up a job. We pretended that I could do something. And I had a job where I could narrate performances of cultural groups coming into the state of Washington and performing in schools. They did these little like 40-minute lecture demonstrations, whether it was an orchestra or an opera company or ballet company. If they got state money, we made up a rule, and they didn't object to it, that they had to hire a resident from the state of Washington to accompany them and do their things. And I could narrate it because I could talk like this. And I would say, and now, this ballerina is going to balance on the end of her toe. And it's only about a square inch, and yet they can keep their balance. And they're great athletes. And I could talk like this, and I wouldn't put stress on my vocal cords. So I did that, and the second group that came to the state of Washington was a ballet company. And I had never been around a ballet company. And first of all, they were drop-dead, walking, heart attack, gorgeous people. They were the most beautiful artists I'd ever been around. And all the women walked around with very little clothing on, which was a big draw for me. And I got very attracted to this one ballerina woman who ended up being my wife for 45 years. So the moral to the story is, and thanks for your help, but you can go now. The moral, whenever you think the worst thing that happened to you, like my vocal cords, if I hadn't have done that, I would have been in some theater somewhere in the United States doing repertory company theater and making my living. But I was forced to quit my professional career in enough time to meet this ballet company and now have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and the best life you can imagine. So things work out.
Now, incidentally, how did you rupture your vocal cords? What caused that?
Well, you mentioned I was born on St. Patrick's Day, and I'm also Irish. You're just going to start doing the math here pretty soon. I was in college. I thought I was, God's ambassador to the world of drama and women, and that I was bulletproof. I could drink and work and never rest and do everything. And I literally stressed myself to the point where I was losing my upper register all the time because I was abusing my vocal cords. And so I would, and what eventually happened is all the blood vessels within the vocal cords themselves started to hemorrhage. And then the membrane surrounding the vocal cords finally got too much pressure and they split. And then they had to heal normally. So it was a lifestyle situation that I have since somewhat remedied.
And everything turned out well, of course,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah. So,
Now, of all the shows you were associated with, what was the first biggie?
well, something that probably very few people know is that I auditioned for, and because they were all theatrical people involved, one of my very first jobs was playing the nephew of Julie Harris. And it was for a PBS special that Julie Harris did called The Last of Mrs. Lincoln, where she played Mary Todd Lincoln after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And I was hired totally against character. I was supposed to, I think the character originally was 12 years old, and they kind of goosed it up to 16. I was already over 6 feet tall, but I was skinny as a rail at the time, and they just said, okay, we'll just make it work. And I got that part. And my first job was, again, playing opposite probably one of the greatest American actresses to ever exist, Julie Harris. And I formed relationships with the director and the writer, and it boosted my confidence level, because then I was unemployed for a long period of time. But I knew that if that was the potential, that I was in for the long haul, and I would stay as long as it took.
Was Step by Step the first show, or The Man from Atlantis?
Man from Atlantis was the first show.
No, I thought that was a very, very, very good show. It wasn't on that long, if I recall.
Yeah, because only you and 12 other people thought it was a very good show.
Would you guys agree with me? Wasn't that a good show?
No, The Man from Atlantis was a great thing, because, and again, maybe because I was born on the 4th of July. I was born on St. Patrick's Day, with the shamrock and the whole thing. But I am one of the truly fortunate. It's being in the right place at the right time, and then being able to pay off being in the right place at the right time. But I had done a part with one line on a television show called Switch. That was Eddie Albert and Robert. Thank you, Robert Wagner. And I was like the fourth lieutenant or something. I literally had one line, came in and said, the car's waiting, and left. So I'm building a boat. Even though I wasn't an architect, I was a carpenter. And so I was building a boat in Long Beach, California, and going on auditions all the time. And I didn't audition, I went in and handed my picture and met the casting director that was going to do this new show for MGM called The Man from Atlantis. And she took my picture and smiled at me and said, thank you very much. And I went back to building a boat in Long Beach. And then she, whom I owe my career to, her name is Ruth Conforti, casting director. She was literally, she told me the story, balancing her checkbook at her kitchen table in Los Angeles. And she was doing this and watching to that episode of Switch. And she looked up just in time to see me walk in, say my line, and turn around and walk out. And she thought, oh, that's that young man who I saw. He didn't come across like that at all in young. And she made a note to call me back in. And so I got called back in to interview with her. And then she called me back in to meet the producers. And then the producers actually read me for the part. And then one by one, I had this entire group of people fighting for me to get this part, which the network did not want me to have. The network literally told them when they saw me, no, he's not right for the part. And the reason is, this is my business I'm in, they said, he's not an 8 o'clock hero. Damn, I thought I was on time. No. An 8 o'clock hero has to be buff and big and muscular and everything. I was a 10 o'clock hero. I was thoughtful and lithe and winsome. And they wanted an 8 o'clock hero because Man from Atlantis was going to be on at 8 o'clock. So the producers did not give up on me. And they put me on this weight-gaining, exercising regime. I still couldn't gain enough weight. And this is how our business works. Fred Phillips is the man who invented Spock's ears, okay? Star Trek makeup man, very famous. He was the makeup man on Man from Atlantis. But they had to make the decision to cast me before I could build up enough muscle. So Fred Phillips made me an 8 o'clock hero body. I spent an afternoon in makeup at MGM Studio while they cut out foam rubber, taped it on me, put things on me, wrapped me, made muscles where I didn't have muscles yet, painted me up, put the lenses in, and they drove me over to NBC Studios in Burbank. Walked me in. I couldn't see a thing because I had the lenses in. I'm a little busy. Could you answer that?
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And I met the heads of NBC, and they looked at me and went, wow, he's really come along. And they said, and the producer said, go wait outside and we'll talk it over. And they wanted me from that moment on. But I literally was wearing a styrofoam body. And I had about 2 months after that of very rigorous exercise, and I became the Man from Atlantis enough that it worked. But there's my business for you. I fooled you.
Well, yeah, that deserves applause, absolutely. After The Man from Atlantis was canceled, what was the next step in your career?
Actors hate me. Not really, but I have the fortunate star that I've lived under. I'm doing Man from Atlantis at MGM Studios. Next door to my soundstage, Gregory Harrison is doing Logan's Run. Logan's Run was produced by a man named Leonard Katzman. Pretty soon these names will start to make sense to you. So Logan's Run was canceled about 2 months before Atlantis was. But Leonard still had to mop up his producer stuff. At the same time, he was hired by Lorimar to produce this new show called Dallas. He then kept watching me go back to work for the time that I was still on the show. And he finally thought, and he went over and talked to my crew after I left. Who is he? What's he like? Is he a team player? Is he a SOB? Is he drunk? Or, all those things that producers need to know. And I apparently passed the test. And I did not audition for Dallas. My people got a call from Leonard Katzman and Lorimar offering me the part of Bobby Ewing on Dallas. I didn't have to audition, I didn't have to read or anything. And it was all because of, so now I've got Ruth Conforti, the casting lady, and Leonard Katzman, who got me Dallas. And I'll answer the next question. Leonard Katzman then called his friends at the end of 7 years when I left Dallas. Leonard Katzman called his friends Tom Miller and Bob Boyette. They were producers of Perfect Strangers and all those other shows, all the way back to Happy Days. And he said, one of our actors is leaving Dallas, and I think he'd be great on a situation comedy. And they said, Larry Hagman's leaving Dallas? And Leonard said, no, it's Patrick Duffy leaving Dallas. And they thought, no, that's not going to work. Okay. So then I went back on Dallas, and then at the end of Dallas, at the end of the 13th year, he sent them the outtakes from Dallas. And because they saw the outtakes from Dallas, Leonard Katzman again, they called me and they just said, we have a TV show and we want you to do it with Suzanne Summers. And I got my next show. So in 24 years, I was out of work for 3 weeks. Wow. All because of Ruth Conforti and Leonard Katzman.
Wow.
Very fortunate set of folks.
Now, the story behind the story, Patrick, you left Dallas and then you came back. Tell us about that.
Dumbest and smartest thing I've ever done. Next question. I sit taller than you, so I have to bring these up. I left Dallas at the end of, you basically sign a 7-year contract. That's the basic contract with the Screen Actors Guild. And at the end of 7 years, Dallas was obviously doing very well. But I looked at the show and I thought, okay, it's an ensemble show and they're my best friends. And I had come from a show, Man from Atlantis, where it was essentially me. And I thought, maybe a good business decision is to leave at the very height of the popularity of everything and then possibly get a show based on that where you then take the next step. So, it was an amicable parting. I had meetings after meetings, and they tried to talk me out of it, and I thought, no, it's what I really want to do, and I left the show. Things didn't go the way that I thought they were going to. I worked, but it wasn't, turning out the way that I had planned. And it wasn't working out for Larry, because he and I were best friends, and he was miserable for the year that I was off, because we played together all the time. And it wasn't good for the show because Leonard Katzman, there's that name again, left the same year I did. And the show took a different turn in terms of the kind of show it was in that year. So about 2/3 of the way through the season, they decided they wanted to make a change, basically because Larry said, you have to do something or I'm going to be very upset. And you did not want to upset Larry. So, my wife and I came back to our house one day, and it was before cell phones, so the answer machine light was blinking. But I can say that to this room because most of us are at that age. And it was Larry leaving me a message, and he said, Patrick, it's Hagman. I want you to come out to Malibu. We're going to get drunk, and I want to talk to you. And as soon as I turned it off, I turned to my wife and I said, you know what? They're going to ask me to come back on the show. And her immediate response to me, you can't go back on the show unless that last year was a dream. Literally, that's what she said. So I went out and dutifully got drunk with Larry, and he basically told me I had to come back on the show, and we started the conversation with the network and the producers, and I ended up coming back. But Leonard Katzman, when I met with him, he said, well, the only way I think we can bring you back, Patrick, is to just make last season a dream, and we'll start from where we left off. So now there's Leonard Katzman and my wife, basically controlling my career. And so I went back on the show, but the worst decision to leave turned out to be the best decision, because I came back on the show, and this sounds crass, I know, but it is a business, okay? It's called show business. I came back on the show at a hugely increased level of participation in terms of that character. Dallas became really the crux of the show was the J.R. Bobby competition for the rest of the run of the show. So my work responsibilities became what I had left the show to accomplish. It just didn't happen the way that I thought it was going to happen. And then the other good news is they backed up the money truck, baby. And it was, and that was the second thing that made it wonderful, because then that really solidified the rest of my life from myself and my family and my children and my grandchildren and everything else. So going back was also the best decision I ever made.
Great, just great. 326 episodes over a span of 13 years. That is truly amazing.
Amazing, isn't it?
I know you had a great relationship with Larry Hagman. How about your personal relationship with Barbara?
Oh, Barbara Belgett. Well, Barbara and Jim, literally from day one, were Mama and Daddy. And that's all we called them. Every once in a while, Barbara's nickname was Bullets, which I had no reason for. I had no idea why. But Jim was always Daddy. And when Jim, I was always Bobby. He never called me Patrick. Yeah, in private, when we would go out to dinner, when we would go over to his house, it was always Bobby. And I just said, okay, that's who I am. For Jimbo, I am Bobby. And Barbara's another interesting story. By the way, so is Raquel Welch. There was the auction about Raquel Welch. Raquel Welch went to high school with my wife when her name was Raquel Tejada. And my wife and she competed for, you'll love this, for Miss Treasure Chest.
You haven't got a picture of your wife with you, have you?
No, let me just say that Raquel Welch was Raquel Welch and my wife was a ballerina. Do the math.
I hear you.
But so, I forgot where that went. I just got distracted. What were we talking about?
I forget. Raquel Welch just knocks me out.
Raquel has that effect on people.
Yes, especially me.
No, but Barbara Belgetti's, because my wife was a childhood actress. She was on Broadway at the age of like 14, then became a dancer. But one of the first plays that her father took her to see when she was about 10 years old was a play on Broadway called The Moon is Blue. And that Moon is Blue play was Barbara Belgetti's as an ingenue. And it was banned in Boston because they said the word virgin. And my father-in-law was embarrassed to tears that he took his 10-year-old daughter to a play and they used the word virgin. But that was Carlin, my wife's first introduction to Barbara Belgetti's. The second was, right after that, my father-in-law went to work for Barbara Belgetti's father, Norman Belgetti's, who was a world-famous architect out of New York. And he's the guy that, before television, would draw the pictures in Life magazine of the battles in World War II at sea, you know, with the boats and the things. Norman Belgetti's was the artist who drew those big fold-out things that you would get. So the history, the coincidental, serendipitous history of the Belgettis and the Rossers, which was my wife's name, and me, for me to then turn around all those years later and play her son on the show and she knew the story and everything, and it's just one of those things that so rarely happens, but when it happens over and over again, you're living with fairy dust sprinkled over you all the time.
Wow. I'm from Boston, by the way, and I had nothing to do with that word, virgin. I want you to know.
Thank you.
Tell us about Knots Landing. How did that begin in memories of that show?
Okay. Well, Knots Landing actually was before Dallas. If that's a shocker, then that's what you need to know. Lorimar went to CBS to pitch shows, and they pitched Knots Landing. And CBS went, we're really looking for something with a little more punch and, you know, sex and money and all that kind of stuff. And the creator of Knots Landing and Dallas said, oh, I've got a show like that. It's about Texas people. Yeah, that's it. Oil people, yeah. And CBS said, oh, sure, bring that in. We'd like to hear that. And he went back quickly and wrote a synopsis for Dallas. Took it in, and they loved it, and so they produced Dallas. 2 years later, being a good business person that Lorimar was, they went back and said, you know, one of the brothers from Dallas could be on Knots Landing. And they said, well, then let's do Knots Landing. And that's how it happened, and that's why there was a Gary Ewing in Knots Landing, and that's why Larry and myself, I don't know if Linda went back, but I know Larry and I did several episodes of Knots Landing so we could go visit, you know, our drunken brother Gary.
It's interesting to note, with all your many accomplishments, you had a hit record in Europe. Yes, Together We're Strong. Tell us about that.
I have a friend out here from France who's been a friend of mine for 20 years, And every time I look up when I'm doing something, this sweet girl, Karen, is there. So she knows this story. I did a record. I'm not a singer, and the record will prove that. But Dallas was so popular internationally, so popular that anybody was looking for any reason to associate themselves with the show. So there's a brilliant, wonderful French singer, probably one of the best female French singers since Edith Piaf, and her name was Mireille Mathieu, okay? And she really was the next Edith Piaf, and she had a great career, but her business person knew how to do business and said, why don't the two of you do a record together? Okay. So I tried to sing with this beautiful singer and did my best, and they did every technical thing they could to make me sound. I once had somebody, I tried to do I did the Barbara Mandrell show, and they wanted me to sing a song. I tried to sing a song, and the music director said, they don't make instruments good enough to make you sound like a singer. And so they took my song out. But the record I did with Mireille was a 45, 2 sides, and it sold like crazy, not because of the singing, because of Mireille Mathieu and because she was singing with Bobby Ewing. That's the thing. So, but yes, I have now made a record, and I shall not make another.
I suppose you might refuse this question, but would you care to honor us with a few bars of that song?
I would rather go to a few bars.
Good one.
You want to set them up, I'll hit them out of the park.
I will, Patrick. What I'd like to do, gang, is to open this delightful gentleman up to you folks with questions and answers. I just ask one thing, that you raise your hand, and when I call on you, if you will stand up and give it some gusto. So please raise your hand. Yes, sir.
You mentioned meeting Larry Hagman in Malibu. Could you give us your favorite memories of him?
Yes, I can. I'm so tired of sitting down. Is this okay? If I can stand up, please?
Are you going to stand and I'm going to sit?
Yeah. And that's the way it should be.
I'm a great straight man, aren't I?
My favorite story of Larry, and this is one of those things. When we got this show, Dallas, we went to read it at Warner Brothers Studio. I walked in, met him for the first time, shook his hand, and I said to myself, I am now shaking my best friend's hand. That was it. And it's true. The rest of our lives together, he was my best friend. So anyway, we get this, we do the reading, and then he drives to Texas. I fly to Texas, and the cast basically flies. Larry had a converted bread truck, like a hippie truck with him.